Hello and welcome to the video converting between equivalent forms of numbers. The illustration to the right shows the process for converting between the equivalent forms of fractions, percents, and decimals. Memorize the processes by heart so you can convert between the forms of numbers by memory. For now, we'll be referring to this map so you can understand how the illustration is read and how the processes are executed. So let's get started. If I wanted to take a decimal and change it to a fraction, the process states I need to divide the number by the last place value, and that will give me a fraction. So let's look at an example. If I have 35 hundredths, note I didn't say 0.35. We must remember to say our decimals properly. So with 35 hundredths, the number is 35. And the last place value is the place value of the last digit. So that would be hundreds. So I'm going to divide by 100. Now I have to simplify my fraction because we always need our fraction in simplest form. So I'm going to divide by the greatest common factor, and that answer is 7/20. So this is my answer in fraction form. What if I wanted to take a fraction and convert it to a percent? Well, the process is use the scale factor to turn the denominator into a 100, and that will give me a percent, or more specifically, a percent fraction. So let's take a look. So if I have 1/4, I need to change my denominator into 100. So that means my fraction must have a denominator equal to that of 100. So what scale factor can I use to change a 4 into a 100? Well, 4 times what makes 100? 4 times 25. And what I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So I have to multiply the top by 25. So 4 times 25 is 100. That means 1 times 25 is 25. Whenever I have a 100 in my denominator, I'm dividing by 100. That is a percent, because the percent sign means to divide by 100. This division by 100 is written as a percent sign. And you take your number and write it to the next of that symbol. And there's your answer, 25%. Let's look at another problem. Let's say I had 1/5, and I want to turn this into a percent. Well, we already know percents have a denominator of 100, so that's something we need to memorize. And now we have to use a scale factor to change that denominator into a 100. So 5 times what make 100? 5 times 20. And what I do to the bottom, I also do to the top. So if 5 times 20 is 100, that means 1 times 20 is numerated here, 20. And remember, our division by 100 turns into our percent sign. The percent sign means to divide by 100. And you have the number, 20%. So that's our percent. What if I have a percent and I'm trying to change it into a decimal? Well, the process here states I need to divide by 100 by moving the decimal 2 place values to the left. And that will give me a decimal. So let's take a look. If I have 36%, I need to find my decimal. Now, when we look at the number, do you see a decimal? No. So whenever we don't see a decimal, our decimal is hiding behind the last digit of our number. So our decimal is right there. So let's put our decimal. Now we can see it. And now we have to move our decimal 2 place values to the left. So 1 place value, the 2nd place value. So our answer is 0.36. Let's look at another example. What if I have 126%? Well, again, we ask ourselves the same question. Do we see a decimal? And if we don't see a decimal, our decimal is hiding behind the last digit of our number. So our decimal is hiding behind the 6 in this case. So let's put our decimal in, and we have to move it 2 times to the left. So 1, 2. So our decimal equivalent is 1.26. And in some cases, you'll see the decimal. Well, this says 8,000 of a percent. Now, if we want to turn it to a decimal, we again have to go through the same process. Do we see our decimal? Yes, it's been written right there for us. So we know where our decimal is. Now we have to move it 2 places to the left. So 1, 2. So in these blank spots, we have to put placeholders or our zeros. So our decimal is 0.00008 or 800 thousandths. Now let's look at the red track. It's going in a counterclockwise direction. So if we started with a fraction and we wanted to turn to a decimal, we need to follow this process. We need to divide by the denominator, which is the last place value, and that will give us a decimal. So let's look at an example. If we have 3/4, we have to divide by the denominator. So it's 3 divided by 4. So let's write it. 3 divided by 4. So you'll put your decimal point, bring it up, and add 2 zeros to start. 4 we're going to 3, 0 times. 4 we're going to 30, 7 times. Minus 28 will leave you with 2. When we drop the 0, 4 goes into 20, 5 times. And that will leave nothing remaining. So our decimal is 0.75. Now if you watched my videos before, you notice that I like to do a vertical division, which is the same thing as the horizontal division that we just shown. So in the vertical division, as I'll show here, I will put my decimal point behind the digit and add a 0. And 4 will go to 30 7 times with a remainder of 2. And then to get the next digit of my decimal, I will add a 0 to my remainder, and 4 will go into 20 5 times. And now I have a remainder of 0. So my answer is still 0.75 or 75 hundredths. Let's say I start with a decimal. I want to turn a decimal into a percent. Well, the red track shows that I need to take my decimal and multiply by 100 by moving the decimal 2 places to the right. And that will give me a percent. So let's look at it. If I have 44 hundredths and I want to turn it into a decimal, well then I have to find my decimal. Well, I see my decimal is in front of the first digit. So I have to move that decimal 2 place values to the right. So 1, 2. And now my percent is 44%. So remember, the key to everything, so remember, the key to turning, so remember, the key to working with decimals is always know where your decimals are. Let's look at this another example. This is my decimal, and I want to turn it into a percent. Well, again, first I have to find my decimal. And if I don't see it, I know that it's hiding behind the last digit of my number. So it's there. Now that I found my decimal, I'll illustrate it so I can see it. And I have to move it 2 places to the right. So 1, 2. So in these blank parts, I'll put my placeholders, zeros. And now I can put my percent sign. So this is 12,500%. Well, I know that's a very huge percentage. I definitely want you to see that even when you don't see a decimal, you should know where it is. And you still have to follow the rules to turn a decimal, or in this case it was a whole number, into a percent. So let's say I have a percent and I want to go to a fraction. Well, the process states I need to write the number in fraction form over 100, then erase the percent sign, and that will leave me with my fraction. Well, let's say I had 35% and I want to turn this into a fraction. Well, remember, our percent sign means to divide by 100. So let's take the number, 35, and then convert the percent sign back to the fraction form, or the division over 100. So now all we have to do is reduce by dividing by the greatest common factor, and now our simplified answer is 7/20. Well, that's the same thing we had earlier. Let's look at another example. What if I had 250%? And I want to turn this into a fraction. Well, again, we'll do the same thing. We'll take the number, which is 250, and we'll convert this percent sign back to its fraction equivalent, same division by 100. So we'll divide this by 100. Now we'll have to reduce. Let's see this is an improper fraction. So how many times does 100 go into 250? Well, twice. So that's two whole numbers. And what's left is 50 over 100, which we can reduce by dividing by the greatest common factor, which is 50. And so that will give our answer 2 and 1/2. So this is our fraction. So take a moment again and make sure you memorize the processes for converting between different forms.